Canada just shook the global defense game, and Washington didn't see it coming. In an unexpected move that has left defense analysts and political circles buzzing, Canada has officially launched its first ever ballistic steel plant, a strategic step toward becoming self-reliant in critical defense materials. But that's not all. At the same time, Ottawa is reportedly courting Swedish defense giant SAAB, raising eyebrows as this comes amid Canada's existing F-35 fighter jet deal with the United States. This bold maneuver not only strengthens Canada's industrial defense base, but also signals a major shift in global defense partnerships, one that has even stunned former U.S. President Donald Trump. When we talk about Canada launching its first ballistic steel plant, we're not just talking about a new factory churning out metal, we're talking about a profound shift in sovereignty, in responsibility, and in vision. For decades, Canada, like many nations, has leaned heavily on global networks for its defense needs, outsourcing not only production but, in a very real sense, security itself. That reliance isn't without cost. Every time you depend on another country for something as fundamental as your defense infrastructure, you trade a little piece of autonomy for convenience. It's easy, it's efficient, until the day it isn't. Now, why does a ballistic steel plant matter? Because it represents an attempt to reclaim that autonomy. Ballistic steel isn't ordinary material. It's the armor of nations, the protective layer that determines whether your military vehicles and critical infrastructure can withstand the chaos of war, or even the unpredictability of modern conflict. When Canada invests in producing this material at home, it's saying, we are no longer content to be shielded by someone else's decisions. That statement reverberates far beyond the borders of a factory floor. But this isn't only about geopolitics, it's also a psychological question. Why do we choose dependence in the first place? Because dependence feels safe, until reality reminds us that safety borrowed is safety that can be taken away. Nations, like individuals, face a choice: do you outsource resilience, or do you build it from within? One path offers comfort, the other offers responsibility, and responsibility is always the heavier burden, but also the more meaningful one. So when Canada opens this plant, it's not just creating jobs or meeting industrial needs. It's modeling a principle that applies everywhere. Strength is not given, it's built. Autonomy is earned through effort, through investment, and through the courage to bear the weight of self-reliance. That is as true for countries as it is for people. And so, the question we're left with is this: in your own life, where have you outsourced your security, your sense of stability, your strength, to forces beyond your control? And what would it mean to take that back, piece by piece, and forge it for yourself? Because whether it's nations or individuals, the message is the same: dependency is easy, but freedom, real freedom, requires work. And that work begins now. What we're witnessing with Canada's move into defense manufacturing is more than a policy shift, it's a redefinition of identity. When a nation decides to build rather than buy, it's stepping into a new domain of responsibility. There's something deeply symbolic about that choice, because it reflects a fundamental principle. Strength is not the accidental byproduct of alliances, it's the deliberate outcome of preparation, and preparation requires foresight, courage, and, frankly, sacrifice. Consider this: for decades, the trend among many Western nations has been outsourcing not only material production, but the very foundation of their security. It's efficient, yes, but efficiency isn't always synonymous with wisdom. Efficiency seeks the shortest route, wisdom seeks the strongest one. By committing to develop its own defense infrastructure, Canada is doing something countercultural in an age obsessed with convenience. It's choosing to carry its own burden. And that act speaks to something all of us intuitively understand: what you depend on shapes who you become. So what does this mean on a deeper level? It means that autonomy, whether personal or national, cannot exist without investment. If you want resilience, you cannot rent it, you must build it. And building takes time, effort, and the willingness to endure hardship for the sake of something greater. That's as true for a country constructing a ballistic steel plant as it is for an individual trying to reclaim control over their life. And here's the thought to sit with: every structure of strength, be it political, economic, or personal, begins with a decision to stop leaning and start standing. Canada has made that decision. The question is, have you? Because the same principle applies everywhere. Independence isn't given. It's earned, and it's earned through deliberate responsibility. That's the price, and it's worth paying. Now, let's talk about Canada's engagement with the SAAB. On the surface, it looks like just another business move, negotiating with a defense contractor, exploring options. But beneath that, it signals something profound. It's a statement that Canada is willing to look beyond the familiar comfort of American dominance in military procurement. That's not just economics, that's psychology. Because every alliance, every dependency, creates a structure of expectation. And when you disrupt that structure, you're saying, we refuse to be defined by what has always been. That's a bold move in any context, national or personal. Why would a country even entertain such a possibility when it's already committed to the F-35 program? The answer is leverage. Leverage matters because it's the antidote to being cornered. If you have only one option, you're not negotiating, you're submitting. And the truth is, submission often feels safe. It's predictable. But predictable arrangements have a hidden cost. They strip away your capacity for independent judgment. That's why exploring alternatives like courting SAAB isn't just about fighter jets, it's about keeping the doors of possibility open. Here's the underlying principle: dependence narrows your world, diversification expands it. When you diversify, you're saying, I am not beholden to a single outcome. I am free to choose. And that freedom isn't trivial, it's the foundation of sovereignty. In life, as in geopolitics, you either create options or you live at the mercy of those who do. So think about this: see, where in your own life have you allowed familiarity to masquerade as necessity? Where have you closed the door to alternatives because it felt easier to stay loyal to what's known? Remember, control belongs to those who preserve the power of choice. And choice, real choice, is never given, it's created. Trump's reaction to this development tells us something interesting. Not so much about him personally, but about the nature of expectations and power dynamics. For decades, the United States has operated under the assumption that its allies would remain in a position of reliance, particularly when it comes to defense. And why wouldn't they? America has dominated the defense sector for generations, setting the standard and holding the technological high ground. But here's the problem with assumptions: they work until they don't. They function as long as reality continues to conform to them. The moment that reality shifts, the entire structure trembles. When Trump expresses surprise, or even frustration, at Canada's move, what he's really reacting to is the erosion of that old pattern. Because dependence is convenient not only for the dependent but for the dominant. It creates predictability. And predictability is the currency of control. But when an ally begins to step outside of that arrangement, when it signals that it is willing to explore alternatives, even flirt with competitors like SAAB, the ground changes. Suddenly, the future isn't as certain as it used to be, and that uncertainty forces everyone to reevaluate their position. Now, this isn't just a political reality, it's a psychological one. People behave the same way. When you've built your sense of security on someone else's compliance, be it a friend, a partner, an employee, and they start exercising independence, it unsettles you. Not because it's wrong, but because it reminds you that control is an illusion, one that only persists when the other party consents to play along. And when they stop, you have a choice: to adapt or try to tighten your grip. So ask yourself, how much of your stability depends on keeping others predictable? And what happens when they change? Because they will. The healthiest response isn't panic, it's preparation. It's cultivating a relationship with reality that can withstand disruption, that doesn't rely on everything staying the same. Nations need that. So do individuals. Because the alternative is fragility, and fragility breaks under pressure. The solution is strength, and strength begins with the humility to recognize that you don't own the future. You only prepare for it. The implications for the F-35 program are not just technical, they're existential. For years, the F-35 has symbolized more than a fighter jet. It's been a testament to alliance, a tangible proof of loyalty between nations. When Canada entertains alternatives, it's not only questioning a procurement deal, it's questioning the assumption that loyalty means exclusivity. That's an uncomfortable thought because exclusivity feels safe, and safety, in human terms, is intoxicating, but safety without flexibility becomes a cage, a gilded one perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. Now, the presence of choice changes the entire dynamic. If Canada is serious about options, then the F-35 program no longer exists in a vacuum of inevitability. It exists in a competitive space, and competition always produces two things: innovation and discomfort. Innovation because it forces adaptation, discomfort because it shatters certainty. Both are necessary if you want growth. Both are painful if you're attached to the old order. And here's where the principle becomes universal. If you want progress, real progress, you have to risk destabilizing what feels secure. You have to introduce alternatives even when everyone says, why bother? Things are fine. Because fine is the enemy of excellence and complacency is the prelude to decline. Canada is disrupting the pattern, and in doing so, It's reclaiming agency in a domain that most nations sleepwalk through. So, what about you? Where have you accepted, fine, because the alternative seemed too disruptive? Where have you allowed the comfort of certainty to rob you of the vitality that comes from growth? Remember this: in life as in geopolitics, the absence of alternatives is the presence of control. And control, when unexamined, becomes a quiet tyranny. The antidote is choice, and choice begins with courage.